Good to see you today. We're really excited about our coaching session today. I always look forward to these, and we've got a great topic today. So, as everybody's gathering, um, I just wanted to let you know what we're talking about. We're talking about the importance of building a compelling case for your capital campaign. My name is Sandra Davis, and my pronouns are she, her. I am the founder and CEO of Donorly. And Donorly works with small and mid-sized nonprofits at moments of growth and change to build your fundraising muscle using donor research, storytelling, and community building. And we especially love those moments of growth and change that are a capital campaign. So I would love to introduce you to Ted Stevens III, co-founder and principal of the Numad group. Ted and I have known each other for, I don't know, well over a decade, maybe, Ted. I don't know. You can do the math on that. But I'm really excited to have him here today so we can talk about all things related to case building around a campaign. And Ted, I would love it if you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Again, Ted Stevens, he, him are my pronouns, and co-founded Numad Group about 15 years ago after working on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, raising money for a Lakota Catholic Jesuit school that educates 600 kids. And one of the things that I loved about that work and love about the work that I get to do is we got to celebrate the success that these kids were having on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Even though they were living in some pretty difficult situations. And that's really why Numad was formed, was to pair communications and fundraising, strategic planning and program evaluation as a agency for nonprofits so that they can do the sort of storytelling and messaging work that allows them to raise millions and millions of dollars for their organization. We work with arts, education, immediate need all across the country. I'm based out of New York City, and our team is all over the place. So it's a pleasure to be here. I don't do this very often, so it's something new and fun for me. Thanks for joining.
Awesome. Thank you, Ted. Okay, I'm going to run through a few housekeeping things. And while I'm doing that, or after I'm doing that, could you please, everybody just jump in the chat and tell us who you are, where you're dialing in from, and what your affiliation, your role, or your organization is to get the chat going. So now some housekeeping issues. So first of all, just a reminder, the call is being recorded. So if you'd like to turn on closed captionings, navigate to the meeting controls toolbar and click the show captions icon. Here's how this works. We're going to be selecting a series of questions from those submitted in advance, and we'll spend up to 10 minutes on each question. But if you haven't submitted a question yet, do not worry. You still have a chance to do that in the chat. Our colleague Weston is here to help us today. We'll be monitoring the chat and we'll try to work through as many questions as we can. So with your question, if you're here, we're going to invite you up and unmute you, and we're going to ask you to introduce yourself. Please give us your name, your pronouns, title, organization, and then state your question. And we may have a little bit of follow-up questions just to clarify what you're asking and help you with that question. So we also encourage you to be involved and lively in the chat. There's a lot of knowledge here on this call today. I see some friends and people I know well who, have had a lot of experience. So please jump into the chat and share your experience. Let's all learn together and have a good time. Okay. So Weston, why don't you get us started?
Great. I'm actually going to pass it back to both of you with just a bit of, let's call it a topic to get us started, almost an icebreaker, but you both know each other so well. So how about we start by talking about the Numad group's approach to building a case for a capital campaign, a case statement. Ted, I know that you have an interesting philosophy on building these materials and how communication around campaigns has evolved for you and the work you do.
Sure. Let's see here. Maybe I'll start with, I was at brunch a few weeks ago with a friend of mine, and one of the things that we get to do in New York City is a lot of work with video production, interviewing people, and packaging those videos together for a variety of different purposes. But my friend Hani had seen something that I had worked on, and she's like, it was really emotional, and it made me want to know more about the organization. And how do you do that? And it took me back for a second. I was like, okay, wait, how do I do that? And there were two things that kind of came to mind to me. One was, I think I'm an innately kind of curious person. I like to walk down the streets of New York and see the world around me and allow that to inform how I do my work, and what I might put out into the world for the clients that I get to partner with. But the second thing was, and maybe this is really more meaningful, is I like to aim for the heart when I talk to somebody, and then when I get to figure out the way to tell their story. So many years ago, I had the great pleasure of sitting down with a New York Times reporter and asked, what the secret was to his success in storytelling, and that's what he told me. He's like, you know what? I aim for the heart. When I have 10 minutes with somebody, I go right to the heart of who they are and what makes them tick as an individual, what moves them as an individual. And that really stuck with me and really has been the way that I approach any interaction maybe that I have with an individual, was a true and real interest in getting to know who they are, what motivates them. And I think that really has informed our philosophy at Numad when it comes to things like raising money and developing case statements. I think we think about like a case statement in a very traditional way. But what we do, or what we like to do at Numad, is we even intentionally call it a show publication. And we do that. We don't even call things case statements anymore, because really what this is about is showing off who you are as an organization, who the people are within your organization, what your mission is, and how you are making an impact on the lives of people or animals or full communities, the reach in the nation, whatever that is. And that has even taken, I'll just say maybe one other thing, that's really taken then another step in like how we think about show publications. Like, are they publications? Are they video? Are they small little palm cards that you can put in your pocket, or a donor can put in their pocket? We like to think about form in a different way as well than just kind of the traditional, let's come up with a campaign name, let's put it on the cover, and then let's put the renderings, on the inside with the timeline. We try not to do that at Numad, and really think a bit more wildly about how we can do this work. So I don't know, Weston, that's how I would respond.
That's awesome. I love that framing of a show publication. That's the right framing, right? I love, because words really matter. It's really important what you call something, and I like the idea of getting away from the idea of a case statement, which immediately puts into my mind a glossy brochure. I think that you still need that in some cases, and there are reasons to have that. But with so many different ways to communicate nowadays, it's a much more fluid situation. What you said at the beginning, I also love the idea that your video made somebody curious to learn more. And I like the idea that you're not telling everything all at once and overwhelming folks, that you're inspiring them to learn more, and then you can get into the details. You can, get into the renderings, then budget numbers, whatever it is that ultimately you need to talk with a donor or donor community about in order to inspire them to give. But the first step is really inspiring them about the project and the mission, right? Yeah. And then you can get into those details.
Yeah, I think we can tend to think pretty traditionally, and there is a place for all of that.
Yes.
Be very, very, very clear as well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we do think about when we start a new project at Numad is how can we think differently? How can we think boldly? And how can we throw things at the wall and see what sticks? And even if they're completely wild or weird, or maybe we think that they're dumb, they usually bring something to the surface that is surprising for the donor and really relevant for the mission of the organization as well. I think that's really important too.
So important. And I think I can imagine that sometimes that's a little scary for folks who are investing a lot of money, time, and effort in a big project like a campaign. But ultimately, that's really important.
That was great. Thank you both. I think that definitely answered the question and gets us off on a nice foot. So the first question from our submissions is from Colleen Rials from the Louisiana Art and Science Museum. I don't think Colleen is on the call, but if you are, please come off mute on camera if you feel comfortable. But if not, this is a good reminder to everyone that you will receive a recording of this after we conclude. So Colleen's question was, what is the best way to have a focused and impactful campaign? I think that's a big question, but are there like tips or tricks or things to think about at the onset that will help you prepare for a focused, impactful campaign and show publication or case statement?
It's a really big question. But let's look at it through the lens of communications. Let's look at it through the lens of a show publication or other ways to explain to the potential donors or the community what the reason is for the campaign, what the result is after the campaign, because ultimately, I think you've got to draw people in and get them on your side and get them excited about what the future holds.
One of the things that's kind of coming to mind with this question for me is another kind of philosophy at Numad is we don't think about this as marketing, but we think about this as education. Sometimes we don't even use the word communications, to be honest with you, but like, how do we educate our stakeholders about what we do, why we do it, what we anticipate the impact to be, and how can we do that in a way that allows them to receive that education in a variety of different formats as well. So I think one of the best ways, first of all, to have a focused and impactful campaign is to make sure that everybody on your team is fully aware and can articulate what not just your mission is, but what you hope to accomplish through whatever the fundraising initiative is. And the fact that they can start to see that or talk about that before you even begin the public phase of a campaign, or frankly, the quiet phase of a campaign as well. One of the things that I think a lot about is how are we always priming our donors with messaging that allows them to set it up so that when you do announce a campaign, it's not a surprise to anybody as well. And they're already fully immersed in what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what you want to accomplish as well. I think that's pretty critical. And oftentimes might need to start to happen before you even think about launching a campaign. It's kind of the work of nonprofits, just period.
That's so good.
That was great. Thank you. And I know Colleen isn't here, but as a reminder, if you have any questions about building a compelling case statement or show publication, we're going to use both of those words here for your capital campaign, feel free to drop it in the chat. But let's go on to the next. I'd like to bring up Adjoa from Grassroots Grocery, the Director of Individual Giving. Are you able to hop off mute, Adjoa? Okay.
I'm here.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you for coming. You had some great questions, and if you don't mind, I want to split them into two focuses. Your first question was, do we need a gift chart or gift pyramid for a campaign? And is it built on the number of past gifts and gift levels? You know, how do we set goals for a pyramid or chart? Do you have anything more to add to that before Sandra and Ted hop in?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So my name is Adjua, and I'm the Director of Individual Giving at Grassroots Grocery. And I just started the position about 7 months ago. I came from the higher ed space, so it's really doing a lot of things from the ground up. And I think in particular with the fundraising pyramid that I was asking about, really stems from the gift table. And I was able to have a contact in this field that was able to kind of give me an Excel spreadsheet with a formula that you can kind of plug in the numbers and it can kind of pop out, the ways in getting to your goal. But I think the root of the question is this conceptual? Is this based on past donations? As an emerging nonprofit, we're also kind of unifying our donations. It's kind of coming from every which way place. And, so we're just trying to figure out, is this necessary? How do we get to the numbers that we need and check out also the feasibility, maybe based on our database of actually getting to our goal?
Okay, that's a big question and a primary question before you get started on a capital campaign, right? So when I think, and I want to talk about pyramids both as a communication tool or a way to inform a solicitation, but I also want to think about it as a planning tool. I think that's what you're talking about, right? You're really looking at how do you fill out that pyramid in a way that helps you understand what this campaign is going to be like.
Absolutely.
Okay. The first thing I like to do is just play around, use it as a tool to play around with, because you definitely, if you want to raise $10 million, you don't want, to try to find $1,000, $10,000 gifts or $10,000, $1,000 gifts. It has to have a hierarchy. It has to have some leadership gifts and some lower level gifts for people in the community who can't afford to make a gift at a higher level. So you can play around with it, and there's lots of tools online to help you build a kind of typical pyramid, but you can play around with it and see what it looks like, and then see if in your database or in your community, there are the people who can fill in at the levels that you want to fill in at. I don't usually think of a pyramid as something I would use in the solicitation process as a piece or something you would put in materials, but sometimes people do use that. And it can be a good tool for the right solicitation, but I'm more think of those as a planning tool. Ted, do you have anything you want to add in here?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. I think about the first fundraising campaign that we did, and that was for that school on the Pine Ridge Reservation back in 2007 to 2011. And I was pretty green at the time of doing this sort of work, and maybe a little naive as well. So things like a gift chart and was a tool that we did find effective to use with donors, but particularly kind of in the feasibility stage of the eventual campaign, and also with some of those early gifts. So our board, we had built a national board of directors for this school, in part to be able to really extend the reach and raise the money that we wanted to raise, and they were really, really key to helping us get to ultimately raising $70 million over a 4-year period.
Wow.
For that school. And the gift chart was a really important tool to get advice from our board, and for also to really get an understanding of where they might fit in that gift chart as well, and where their friends might fit into the gift chart as well. So I think in that case, it was a really important tool. I also think about gift charts when you are sitting down and meeting with an individual donor and having it something in the back pocket that you can use, mostly to write on. So, how can you keep it really, really simple? And how is there a lot of white space on that gift chart? So again, when you're having conversations with a donor, hopefully from a strategy standpoint, you're not just wanting to garner their support, but you're also wanting their advice, their guidance, and their strategy as you work to fundraise. How can that gift chart be used for, again, scratching notes on a piece of paper and for them to see like, oh, this is where I might be able to contribute, or this is where I might be able to stretch to be able to raise the sort of money that you're looking to raise. when you have a gift chart that says 50,000 or 250 or a million or 5 million or whatever it is, you know that that donor is sitting there thinking to themselves, what are they either going to ask me for, right? Or what am I going to be able to contribute or want to be able to contribute to this organization? So I think it can be an important tool. I wouldn't put it in a case statement or a show publication, personally, but I would have it in your back pocket to use.
It's so good what you said about the idea of using that with board members, because I think, board members need a lot more information at the early stages of the campaign. They have to feel confident that the organization can take on the campaign at the level that you want to raise money. And I think that's a tool that can help them understand, yes, where they fit in, where they have friends who might be able to give gifts at those levels. And help them kind of build their confidence around it, or ask the questions that need to be asked around, how are we going to get here? Who do we know who can give gifts at these levels?
I sit on a board of an arts organization, and we are in the middle of a quiet phase for a campaign, and I'm lucky me serving on the committee for that.
Of course you are. Why wouldn't you?
We have a meeting coming up, and they just announced some materials in advance of and that included a gift chart that showed kind of progress to date, sort of thing. And I got to say, it was really motivating to see the progress that we had made from our last meeting to this meeting as well. It was just, they had done it in a very visual way, but it really said to me, like, wow, we're kicking butt right now on this. And it also showed me, as somebody who is soliciting people in the community, where I might be able to leverage my network or be able to make a dent in that, in the progress of that campaign. So it was a motivating tool internally for our little small committee that's looking to raise $15 million over the next couple of years.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that this is all a good segue into your second question, Adjoa, which was about engaging major donors using this gift chart or pyramid. You had submitted, how can we best incorporate the capital campaign pyramid concept into major donor conversations while ensuring alignment with their expectations? And what are other ways that we might communicate with major donors during a campaign?
Yes, and to just add this one little one-liner, is
Please.
what you're raising money for really important at the moment? If everyone's focused on the fires or the, recent tragedies, when we're trying to engage major donors, and even right now, like asking for meetings or can we eat, are some days when you're just in this kind of major gift pipeline where you just don't email anyone because it might be a heavy day today? Or do you continue with business as usual and kind of keep the spirits high with message, with appropriate messaging? So I just think it's also like, as I'm diving deeper into this profession, trying to grapple with, world tragedies and what you're particularly raising for money for, and how you want to engage major donors where their priorities may be in LA right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a big part of engaging major donors is getting to know them, getting to build those deep relationships so you can understand what their priorities are. So I think maybe going back to Ted's focus on curiosity is part of those conversations, without any expectation of a first or early conversation being about a gift or a campaign, but really understanding maybe your organization is their top priority. And they're still paying attention to everything else that's going on in the world, but they really believe in what you're doing and want to make a difference alongside you. So I think having a deep understanding of and curiosity towards those folks is probably, a first step, and they'll answer that question for you.
Yeah, I'll add the power of the question, how are you? How are you doing? Sort of thing, very simple question, but a very meaningful and important one too. So I would think about, your donors and where they are in the country or in the world, and certainly wanting to have an understanding of what is happening in their world is really important, but sometimes simply just calling somebody and asking that question can be the most meaningful thing, both for you, your organization, and for them as well. So I don't know, that's what I would add to you.
So helpful. It gives me an
that's good.
alternative to I hope all is well, you know?
Yeah.
Like actually asking the question, how are you, is just, it's basic, but something you're probably just, I'm not naturally thinking about.
Where
Yeah,
are you, where's your organization located?
We're based, our office is based in Harlem. It's a co-working space, but
Okay.
we serve Upper Manhattan in the Bronx.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so
Sorry,
much.
Ted.
Oh,
Ted, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to maybe add one more thing, and I'm just thinking about some of our lessons or learnings from this week with the executive order from the Trump administration that threw a lot of nonprofits into a tizzy this week.
Yeah.
You know, my Tuesday was going to be a really solid, just get my head down and do the work sort of day, and I ended up being on the phone almost all day long with clients, thinking about kind of crisis management, thinking about the ways that they might, you know, those donor or those organizations that are receiving federal dollars in one way or another weren't certain if they were going to be able to operate 30 days from now.
Yeah.
And how important it was for the relationship, but then also for an articulation to their donor bases to understand how they were doing, what they were doing or what they were thinking about, and how they could communicate this possible impact to their donor base in a way that continues to affirm the mission and grows financial support. You know, it's probably really hard for some of these organizations to fill that potential loss, because for some it's millions and millions of dollars with individual support right away. But it is important to communicate what the realities and the possible impacts are, and to make sure that your donors have confidence in your mission at the same time. But sometimes that's our work too, I think, as fundraisers or as nonprofit professionals, is to know what's happening in the world and not being afraid to pick up the phone call and have those sometimes difficult discussions, and also think strategically about how you can put that out into the world in a way that builds confidence for the work that you're doing. So that's the other thing that was just bubbling up for me, Sandra. Sorry.
So important, yeah. And you know, that they're your partners. Your donors are your partners. They should be there right alongside you and should have the information that you have. And that just builds a deeper trust and deeper relationship. So thank you. Thank you for that.
thank you. And thank you, Adjoa, for those really great questions.
Yes.
I want to highlight once again, if you have any questions to submit for Sandra and Ted, feel free to drop them in the chat around building a case statement for your capital campaign or communication during, before, amidst a capital campaign. And with that, I want to highlight Joanna's question. Joanna is the head of school at Peninsula School. Joanna, if you're on the call, I would love for you to hop off mute, but I don't see you, but if you're under a different name, hop on. And Joanna's question was, what is the ideal timeline for a capital campaign? And I know that that's not a one size fits all, but maybe we can talk about the phases and the things that we think about in the different phases of a campaign, or how to know that we're moving at a steady pace, or when do you start to talk about how to communicate around your capital campaign? When is too late? When is too early?
It's a big question, isn't it, Ted? Maybe we can start to, maybe what we can do is talk about what the planning phase is. What do you need to get in shape before you know the answer to that question, before you know it's time to start? What kind of questions do organizations need to ask themselves? I mean, one of the things I think is looking at that. Well, first of all, you have to figure out how much money you're going to raise. You have to figure out what the project is, how much it's going to cost. And then, you know, think about those planning around your donor pyramid and the ability of your board to play their role and their willingness to play their role. I think having conversation with the board early on is really important. It's going to require their effort and their buy-in. So having those early conversations with them makes all the difference in the world. What else do people need to think about, Ted?
I like to look at how your annual fund is doing and where you see the opportunities for mid-level donors to be able to step up into their giving. I think can sometimes be really telling on the possibility of a campaign of some sort, whether it's a mini campaign or it's something that might be major for your organization. I think that always looking at your annual fund numbers and results is really important. But then B, I think you can see a lot about the opportunities and the possibilities to grow your donor base and also deepen the relationship that you have with your current donors can oftentimes be telling as well. Another thing that kind of comes to mind is if you're really deepening the education work that you're doing for your organization, if you're really seeing that you're building a lot of momentum towards a particular project, effort, initiative, or just your mission as a whole, that can usually be really telling if it's an opportunity to step into a campaign. We just finished kind of a historic campaign for a chiropractic college most recently, and it was a campaign where another consultant had said that they could raise $18 million. We ended up raising 30.
Congrats, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. But it was also their first campaign, and we're already in the planning stages for another campaign, right? We didn't take the day after the celebration to rest. We started to look at where our next opportunity is. And I think that we have to have that kind of strategic thinking too, because in many ways, we're always in a campaign. Sometimes it's a little bit more public about it, or we're using different tactics as well.
Well, congrats on that. I've been watching that campaign as you've been posting about it. So that's a great result. Yeah, it's but I think that all those questions that asked at the beginning will tell you what your timeline is. And I think that depending on the size of the campaign, your timeline could be really short or it could be several years. It depends on if you've got what you want to raise, if you have significant leadership gifts from folks who are ready to make those commitments. It might be that the timeline could be relatively short, but if you really need to use your campaign to cultivate much more deeply a wider constituency, then that time frame for cultivating that wider constituency can lengthen the length of your campaign. And I think campaigns are such a great opportunity to really engage the full community. And if you need to make it a little bit longer in order to do that, and you can, and you have the resources to do that, I think that is always time well spent, because that's going to set you up for the next campaign you're planning one day after you finish the current one, or set you up for the support you will likely need for your annual fund that's expanded once you have a new building, a new wing, a new expanded project. So you really need to be building that campaign, the community along the way, and that can take some time.
I'll also offer, when we think about the topic of today of case statements or show publications, it's another kind of a typical thing that people will put the timeline for their campaign in a printed piece like that. And I would invite us to, again, think a little bit differently about that, because oftentimes if you're experiencing some success, you might want to extend that campaign, right? Both the dollar amount that you want to raise or the time frame. Same goes if you're struggling a little bit to start to bring in some of those early gifts that you want to. You don't want to look like you're not meeting the goals that you have. So how can a timeline be something that is motivating for you and your team, and maybe for your board as well, or your campaign committee? But also, how can that maybe not be a public document that you put out into the world, so that you have the flexibility to make the adjustments that you want to make or that you need to make, depending on how you're achieving early success or maybe some initial struggles as well.
So good. I think that, a deadline and some urgency is always good for getting people to make commitments on their gifts, right? So thinking about, instead of thinking about an end of a campaign, maybe thinking about little moments during the campaign of, a matching gift that has an end date that you want, to inspire people to give, to achieve, or other little milestones along the way. So you can still create that urgency and create that feeling of momentum and moving forward without having your long-term plans, out into the public, because long-term plans always adjust and change. And, I think you want to have a goal for the campaign that's completely reachable. I always want to declare victory. I want to know that I can achieve that goal, but I also want to know that I'm not leaving money on the table. So if we discover that when we achieve that goal, like with the campaign you just completed, that you can go beyond it. It also is very exciting to say we're expanding our goal and we're expanding what we're raising money for, and having that moment of announcement in a campaign as well.
Can I throw out one more thought there, Sandra, too? I'm thinking about the important role that real solid strategic planning for an organization has
Yes.
on fundraising, right? And frankly, on your case statement or your show publication as well, right?
Yes.
Clear strategic plan that provides the direction for moving forward, and then the ability to articulate that strategic plan, not as a strategic plan, but as the vision for your organization within a show publication, I think is also just like a really critical thing to really keep in mind as you're thinking about the writing or the storytelling and the means from which you want to do that, because that has got to be the guiding light or the guiding principle for your fundraising activities and certainly for the mission of the organization. So, but we don't need to use those words, strategic plan.
Yeah, 100%.
Well,
There are donors who want to see and need to see a strategic plan because that's their language, right? But that's not most people's language. And, I always want to feel tingles when I'm reading about a goal of an organization. I always want to feel that emotional response. And, that's what I'm looking for when I'm thinking about how you're articulating what a campaign will do for the future of this organization. And I'm thinking too about all the different ways that you need to communicate for a business owner who is going to be positively impacted by the building going up in their downtown district. You want to have a different message for them. And for the, longtime donor who was really impacted, maybe as a former client of the mission, you want to have a different kind of message for them. So there's a lot of nuance in how you need to inspire people to take part in your campaign.
This is awesome. And I think this is a great segue. I want to spend the next 10 minutes or so talking logistics about case statements or show publications. And I see AM posted some great questions in the chat. I welcome you to come off mute if you'd like, but I'm going to read them, and we're just going to go through some logistics around building it. So I know, Ted, you talked about how your Numad group is playing with the way that these are presented. Is there a length that we recommend for a show publication, case statement, or document? What's too long? Maybe what's too short and what's maybe too long? What's too much information?
I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest with you. It's just because it truly, like, I want to be honest, I think it really depends, right? It's nice to not have to articulate your impact and your mission in a lot of words, but some people also want that as well. So I think a little bit more about what are the stories that I want to tell, who are the people that I want to put forward that really show the mission in action and the potential impact in action. So I think a little bit about that. I do think things like, short bullets on what the goals of a particular campaign are really important. But to be honest with you, the show pieces that we've put together, some of them are 8 pages, some of them are 24 pages. It just really, truly depends. I'm sorry.
So,
I
would
can
you
be very
say,
direct about that.
would you say that there are any things that absolutely must go in a show publication or a case statement? What is
Yeah.
the information that you must have?
So I think you have to tell stories, first of all. I think we think a little bit about like, this is what we need, or this is what we want, this is what we hope to accomplish. But I think you've got to tell stories about the people that are actually on the ground doing the work that you do, and are being impacted by the mission that you have. So when you think about case statements or show publications, think about them as storytelling books, if you will, right? I think is the number one thing I would say, and that is like the thing that we always do in a piece like this. I also think when you're thinking about storytelling and how you do that, sometimes we'll think about like, oh, I have to feature this $1 million donor, right? Or I need to feature the president of the organization. But think about the truck driver, right? That's carrying the food to a food bank. Think about the warehouse worker that is making sure that the clothes that may be donated to an individual are clothes that are worthy of that individual and have dignity as well. Like, think about the people that are actually doing the work, who can really provide the insight on the impact and why they do it. I think is also really important when you're thinking about what stories you want to tell. Other musts, Sandra, other things that come to mind to you?
It's what you're bringing up for me is that I think that we have a desire as humans to tell all the things, and that's where a case statement can get very overloaded with, we have to have this piece, we have to have this piece, there's a budget, renderings, all the things, because you want it to be a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. And it's hard not to do that because you want to make it worth the money and the level of time it takes to put these things together. But if you do all of that, if you put a budget and a timeline and everything else in there, then it becomes potentially stale or outdated really quickly. So maybe a less is more approach for the big communications piece, whatever that is, first, and that might be on your website, and then all of the details can be separate pieces or communicated separately.
Yeah, and just as I'm talking about storytelling, I'm thinking about a client that we just closed a campaign for, and maybe these are the questions that we need to think about, right? So sometimes when we think about a case statement, we might think about like, what do we want the donor to know?
Yeah.
But maybe what we really need to be thinking about is what does the donor want to know,
Yes.
right? And that even like, it might feel like a small nuance, but it's actually really, really, really important.
Huge, yeah.
And the example is, so as much as I love storytelling, this particular client, they needed to build a bigger warehouse. It's a statewide food bank. And that's not sexy, right? There's not maybe a lot of storytelling that you can do there. But what the donors wanted to know was how is this going to help people get the food that they need, right? So the storytelling wasn't necessarily about all the people that are impacted, but it was the logistics of being in a rural state with one food bank, right? And these are sophisticated donors, right? Who can give millions of dollars, who understand systems, who understand building businesses, right? And so that storytelling really had to be one that wasn't necessarily about people, even though we found the way to tell the story of the truck driver that drives thousands of miles, right? But we told the story about process and logistics and how this is going to make the work more efficient and more effective as well. So it's about understanding who your audience is and not just what we think that they need to know, but what they actually want to know.
That's so interesting. It's so different from how you might approach another organization. And it's really, you're kind of making a case for investment there and explaining what the ROI is in terms of how that organization is being served, which feels very different than, you know, the kind of inspiring support of a mission. But it's exactly what you're doing.
We've talked about a lot of case statements, and I'm sure Ted, you and Sandra have read a lot of case statements. I'm curious if there's anything that that pulls you back, that you don't like to see, or mistakes that organizations might make when approaching a case statement. Any ideas?
I got a couple, maybe. So the first thing I think about is the shelf life of these sorts of things. So, you know, we don't have infinite resources, right? So how can this piece be something that doesn't become extinct right away, but more so has a shelf life that might even support you in the fundraising that you do beyond what your campaign might be? So I think of that as a mistake that we often make, is that like it tells the story of right now, but doesn't allow us the runway that we need. So that just kind of goes back to what do you put into it, and what might you think about being something that can be inserted from time to time. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Another thing that comes to mind, and this is, you know, like when I get solicited for the organizations that are meaningful to me in my life, I think about, does this actually align with where my philanthropic interests lie? So I can think of times that, you know, organizations that are, again, are meaningful to me, that I will give on a year-to-year basis, might come to me and say, hey, you know, help donate to this thing, right? But it actually doesn't align with my philanthropic interest. And so how can you always make sure that whatever it is that you're putting in front of somebody, in whatever form it takes, actually aligns with what they've told you they care about or is meaningful to them, I think is something that's really important too. So it's not a one book, if it is a book, right, fits all, you know, sort of mentality. So think a little bit about that as well.
I think for me, too many words. I want to see less words in a document like that, or on a website page. I want to know that I can kind of skim it and get to the point, and then find a way also to dig deeper if I want to really read something and get into the details. But I think I've seen a lot of case statements that are just really text heavy. And I don't know that that's, I think visual storytelling is really, really important in this context too. That just helps, again, make a bit emotional connection for folks.
I have another one.
Okay.
I think about covers. Like, so if it is a piece, covers that like have the name of the campaign on it, get rid of it, right? Like, what's the bold statement? What's the impact that you're gonna have that you can get right out of the gates on? Like, use that real estate in a way to say something to the donor that's going to be meaningful to them. So,
oh, that's so good. That's so good. You want them to open. You want them to read on, and that cover, that title cover, doesn't necessarily do it.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Think about that.
I have one last question, if you'll both. Okay, so we're talking about, you know, as we're closing this hot seat coaching, I want to close and finalize this case statement that we've been talking about. Any tips for a streamlined review process? Because a case statement involves, a case statement involves so many people. It will be seen by staff, by board, and everyone's contributing to it. So what are tips that you have for making it as easy as possible?
Oh, I'm all ears, Ted. I have one idea though, but I'm all ears.
Work with the decision maker or makers is the thing I think about. You know, I think we can kind of wordsmith things to the detriment of the actual work that we're doing.
Yes.
So I think helping people to understand what the process is to create the piece is important, right? An articulation of this is how we're going to move through this process.
Yeah.
I think seeking guidance and advice throughout so that like the finished piece doesn't become a surprise, I think is really important as well. And then I think it's important to know who the decision maker is. At the end of the day, who's going to say, this is what we're going toward, I think is also just really critical, because otherwise everybody becomes the decision maker.
Mhm.
And it's content by committee, and I think that's the best way to dilute something that could pack an emotional punch really, really quickly.
That's so good. It can be really, really challenging. And I think that sometimes this is a moment, you know, relatively early in a campaign, when you're deciding on how you're communicating your campaign. And I think sometimes people can use it as an excuse to slow down and stall, so that the work of solicitation and the work of really moving forward can be a scary next step. And this is a way to kind of stall by, you know, kind of spending too much time on getting those pieces right. I think what you said, I'm just going to maybe re-articulate what you said a little bit differently, is upfront have a very clear plan of what the timeline is, who actually is the final decision maker, who needs to be brought in early, have that written out and have it time bound, and point back to it on the process so that you're keeping everybody in line, and remind folks that, you know, the delay is costing money and time. And you do want to move forward with the campaign. And, you know, anything you create, you can recreate and revise as you're getting feedback from your community on how they're reacting to it. Hopefully you've got a lot of that before you even start, but you'll get more as you go along. And, you know, it's not terribly difficult to adjust things, recreate, redefine how you're talking about the project, so that people are reacting to it in the way you want to, and you're sure that you're clear about what you're creating.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I'm going to pass it to you, Sandra, for any final takeaways and where you can find us.
All right. I always feel like these could go 2 hours. I won't make anybody sit through 2 hours of this, but I just feel like these conversations can be so lively. The topic is so big. There's always more to talk about. But Ted, you've given me personally a lot to think about. I hope you've given everybody else on the call some things to think about in terms of ways to think about how you're communicating, how you are inspiring your donors through whether it's a case statement, a show publication, a video, a website. There are so many ways to communicate, and so many ways to inspire commitment to a campaign. And you know, you've really given me a lot of ways to think about this. And I think one of my big takeaways is really thinking about what the donor wants to hear rather than what you want the donor to hear. That framing is wonderful. And, you know, I really want to think about that, you know, all the time, and think about that in terms of how we're inspiring our clients in their communications work. So thank you for that. Okay, we're wrapping up here. So we are going to be following up with an email that is containing the session recording and a little bit of information about our upcoming February session. And we'll also share details on how to stay in touch with us and how to stay in touch with Ted. So you can find Donorly on social. Our handle is @_Donorly everywhere. And we'll share my LinkedIn link as well. And then Ted, where can people find you?
Oh yeah, I'm on the socials too. More for fun than anything. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn and the Instagram. I love to take photos just as a hobby. So Yeah, you can see some pretty things.
Yes, I recommend following Ted on Instagram, definitely. So we'll share all that information with you in the chat, and we'll share it in the follow-up email as well. So thank you all for being here. Let me tell you a little bit about our February session. We are going to be conducting a session with Barbara Gross, principal of BDG Consulting. Barbara, wave. There she is. There she is. So we're going to talk about capital campaigns again, where to start and how to avoid stalling. I think stalling is a major, potential pitfall on a campaign. So you want to keep that momentum going. So we'll talk about that. And I'm really excited to have Barbara back. This is her second time doing a hot seat coaching session with us. And I promise you, it will be a lively conversation. She brings a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. That's on Friday, February 28th at 1 p.m. ET. Thank you
Sandra,
all.
if I can just interrupt 1 second.
Yes, go ahead.
I think this is just a wonderful, I hope people come to both, because this is a wonderful one too. And I hope that there'll be a lot of people who listen to this who weren't with us today. But, I always learn something. So Ted, thank you. I learned a ton. Or just sort of reinforce things. And so I think these are great. This is a great sequence. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Barbara. I love having you. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Thank you, Ted. I love this conversation with you. I love all of our conversations. You always bring something exciting and new and kind of force me to think about things in a different way. So I'm really, really appreciative for you. I'm appreciative for everybody who showed up today to be here, to participate, to bring your questions. It really just makes for a great session. And so thank you all, and we'll see you again in February.